December 19, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow swallowed the roads as temperatures plunged below freezing. Near the crossroads outside St. Vith, soldiers of the U.S. First Army struggled to keep trucks moving through forests where every gallon of gasoline could mean the difference between retreat and survival. German armored columns under Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt pushed westward in the opening days of what would become the Battle of the Bulge, determined to sever the Allied supply network before it could recover. Then came a discovery that left even seasoned German officers staring in disbelief. Beyond the shattered tree line lay fuel depots stretching farther than many of them could see, row after row of steel drums, towering storage tanks, and endless convoys of tanker trucks waiting their turn. Men who had spent years rationing every liter of fuel suddenly found themselves standing before reserves that seemed almost impossible to comprehend. For an army whose offensives had repeatedly stalled because of empty fuel tanks, the sight challenged everything they believed about modern warfare. What they did not yet realize was that these mountains of gasoline represented something far greater than American wealth. They were the visible edge of an industrial machine capable of feeding entire armies across an ocean without slowing its advance. This is the story of why captured German soldiers could scarcely believe the size of America's fuel dumps, and how logistics, more than firepower alone, helped decide the outcome of the Second World War. The contrast had been building. Long before the winter of 1944, Germany entered the war with remarkable engineering talent, but dangerously limited access to petroleum. Its economy relied heavily on imported oil and expensive synthetic fuel produced from coal through the Fischer-Tropsch process. Even at peak production, synthetic plants could not fully satisfy the demands of the Luftwaffe, Kriegsmarine, and rapidly expanding panzer divisions. From the opening campaigns in Poland and France to the invasion of the Soviet Union, German commanders learned that victories were often measured not only in kilometers gained, but in liters consumed. Tanks abandoned for lack of fuel became a familiar sight. Supply officers counted every barrel, and ambitious offensives frequently outran the trucks meant to sustain them. Across the Atlantic, the United States faced an entirely different reality. By 1944, America was producing well over half of the world's crude oil. Refineries along the Gulf Coast operated around the clock, while pipelines, railroads, and tanker fleets moved fuel with astonishing efficiency. General Dwight D. Eisenhower understood that an advancing army lived or died by logistics. Every gallon reaching the front represented thousands of workers, engineers, sailors, railroad crews, and truck drivers performing an invisible battle far behind the lines. Following the Normandy landings on June 6, 1944, Allied forces advanced much faster than planners had expected. Their success created an enormous logistical challenge. Temporary fuel depots appeared across France as engineers built one of history's largest supply systems. The famous Red Ball Express, staffed largely by African-American truck drivers operating under exhausting conditions, carried millions of gallons of gasoline toward the advancing front, often driving day and night with little rest. To German reconnaissance pilots and intelligence officers, the scale was difficult to accept. Reports described enormous storage areas packed with fuel drums, tanker vehicles, pipelines, and maintenance facilities. Some commanders questioned whether such estimates were exaggerated, yet every captured depot revealed that the reports had actually understated American capacity. The contrast became painfully clear during the Battle of the Bulge. Adolf Hitler's final major offensive in the West depended on capturing yet full stocks, because German reserves were already critically low. Panzer crews entered battle with strict fuel allocations, knowing that success depended upon seizing American gasoline almost as much as defeating American soldiers. When German units overran isolated supply areas, They found quantities of fuel unlike anything they had experienced during the war. Prisoners' letter recalled the amazement of German personnel who wandered through vast storage sites, unable to reconcile such abundance with their own chronic shortages. Some believe the Americans must have hidden even larger reserves elsewhere because no army, in their experience, would afford to leave so much fuel within reach of the front. But these depots were only one link in a much larger chain. Even if a storage area was destroyed, replacement fuel continued flowing from ports, pipelines, railroads, and truck convoys. The Allied logistical system had been designed with redundancy, ensuring that no single loss could halt the advance for long. By early 1945, relentless Allied bombing had crippled Germany's synthetic fuel industry. Aircraft remained grounded, armored divisions received only fractions of their required fuel, and training exercises were cancelled because precious gasoline could no longer be spared. The war increasingly became a contest between an industrial network that could replace losses almost endlessly, and another struggling simply to keep its engines running. In the end, captured German soldiers were not merely astonished by the size of American fuel dumps. They were witnessing the physical manifestation of overwhelming industrial power, a force measured not only in tanks and aircraft, but in the endless rivers of fuel that kept every one of them moving toward victory. Months after the guns fell silent across Europe, abandoned fuel depots still dotted the continent, silent reminders of a war won as much by logistics as by battlefield courage. Historians would continue debating the brilliance of commanders and the effectiveness of individual weapons, yet one conclusion emerged with remarkable consistency. Armies advance only as far as their fuel allows. For many former German officers, the memory endured. They had expected to fight superior numbers, but not an opponent capable of sustaining entire armies with what seemed like inexhaustible supplies of gasoline. The vast fuel dumps they encountered during the final year of the war revealed a truth that could not be captured on battlefield maps. America's greatest strategic weapon was often invisible until someone stood in front of it. Behind every Sherman tank, every fighter aircraft, every truck crossing frozen European roads stood an immense network of workers, engineers, refinery crews, merchant sailors, and drivers, whose efforts rarely appeared in wartime headlines, but proved just as decisive as any frontline assault. The greatest shock awaiting many captured German soldiers was not another. The tank rolling over the horizon. It was realizing that behind that single tank stretched an ocean of fuel and an industrial engine that never stopped turning.